also welcome those that may be listening online. Welcome to everybody. Can I ask that you turn mobiles off, those that are here, as it can interfere with our recording. And we do trust that those that are listening can hear clearly we've got our masks on in here as well. So please be seated. I just want to acknowledge, let people know that we got the What If Award, which is fantastic. There it is. So we can see that. It'll be displayed somewhere, no doubt. And also I just want to make a statement to feel for those people from our community that are from Ukraine and those who've got a lot of family and friends and people they can't contact at the moment. So as a council, our hearts go out to them. I did go to an event which was organised with those people, some of them, met a few of them, and it's really sad to hear their stories. But also to those around Sydney and Brisbane in that area for the floods, and there's so many people being impacted. It's quite amazing. It shows you how fortunate we still are to live in this beautiful city and the great state. But yeah, my heart goes out to all those that have been affected at the moment, and as a council we send them our prayers and our thoughts as well. Thank you.
Mention the apologies.
Apologies. Councillor Stojanczyk and Dakin for today. Declaration of interest. No declaration of interest. Confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of February. Councillor Spencer moved. Councillor Harris seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. No deputations or petitions. We do have a community report. Georgia Axton and Tim Wedlock from the Northern Suburbs Community Centre. So welcome. If you can come forward to the mic, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, Danny, for inviting myself and Tim along to speak to you all. We are one half of the Adventure Play Across the Northern Suburbs program. There's also two other workers at the Starting Point Neighbourhood House, and we're at the Northern Suburbs Community Centre, which our lovely Hugh McKenzie is our president of the board. So I have asked Danny to pass around some little sheets of paper. There's a QR code on that, and that just scans straight to a video, so the end of your video, which prompted Danny to ask me to come and speak to you guys. So the Adventure Play program is a subtle therapy based program, and we currently work with young people aged 10 to 16 in the northern suburbs of Launceston, and we take them to do adventure activities such as rock climbing. It could be as simple as a bushwalk, or to the park, and any sort of tactile new experiences. They're small group, so anywhere from 6 young people to 12 young people, so that we can make sure that we give them the best care possible between the two of us, and we also work in collaboration with other organisations such as the Migrant Resource Centre and Youth Health North in Ravenswood. So I'll just read a bit, because from our project brief, they can say it better than I can articulate it. So this program will be informed by Australian Childhood Foundation trauma-informed recommendations and models from adventure-based therapy that together suggest that movement, balance and play are essential, and that safe social groups, safe experiences of the natural environment and simple adventure-based activities can be used as part of a process to develop positive outcomes for young people with such backgrounds. For example, they would build healthy attachments, develop skills, learn to manage stress and work to change long-held beliefs about themselves. And so this program is for those at risk of being disengaged from the school system, from in the community, young people who might be doing antisocial behaviour. And we have seen through this program, we've been running this program since I would say the beginning of 2019, and we've seen an increase in attendance at school and decrease in antisocial behaviour within these young people that we're currently targeting. So I think the numbers off the top of my head is we've reached 246 young people so far over the last 3 years. And We hope to continue to do that. At the moment, we're funded through the Bridget Archer, driving social inclusion through physical activity, and that's funded until the end of this year. After that, we don't have any funding, but we're in the process of looking for extra funding, and so if anyone has any suggestions, we're absolutely welcome and open to suggestions, please.
Yeah. I just thought I'd add, so I've come from a primary school background. I was a teacher for 13 years, so I've got a little bit of a different perspective to Georgia, and I just see the need for this is massive, and how the kids grow through the program, and it's often the highlight of their week to do this, and then to share their experiences with us, to share them with family members and their peers. It's a huge opportunity for growth for them in a group, but also individually. So I'm new to it, but I've seen how it works, and if we can continue it, like the need out there is immense. I'm sure you're aware of it. So to be able to reach even more, I think it can only be positive if we could continue it. So we welcome some feedback perhaps and some ideas that you people would have. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, and Graham Pringle, who ran an adventure therapy course with us in the very beginning, in the inception of the program, he said to us, he's like, never underestimate how much an impact a subtle therapy such as adventure play, which is, you know, social and emotional building skills, can have on a young person. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Georgia, and thank you, Tim. Thanks very much for coming, and all the best in the work that you do as well. We appreciate what you're doing, and all the best for the future.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much. So we have our public questions on notice that are there for those who are interested. We also have public questions now without notice. So any questions from the public without notice? Yep.
G'day, Ron Baines, Kings Meadows. I'm reliably informed that the footpath definitions which I've given to you all should also be sent on to the state government, as they don't seem to understand it either. But I will still ask the question that I came here for, and that is, will this council consider a bylaw that bans e-scooters from our footpaths to protect our citizens and visitors from any harm, as is your duty of care?
Yeah, as you're aware, it's a trial that we're running at the moment. We'll consider all of these matters, including yours.
So I can't understand a word you're saying with that mask on. Sorry, I've got a hearing problem.
Oh, sorry. I will take it off for you. Is that better?
A bit.
A bit.
Yeah.
We are doing a review at a trial period, and that will be reviewed at the end of the trial period or during the trial period. We'll continually review it, and your matters will come into consideration with all the others that we get. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Bye.
Any other questions from public? Thank you. So we go now under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993. Council acts as the planning authority in regard to the items included in agenda item 9, Planning Authority. So we have 9.1. I don't think we have any speakers. I don't have any. No speakers. So someone happy to move? Councillor Mackenzie moved. Seconder, Councillor Soward. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I will briefly. I think this is a fairly straightforward application that's been put forward. It's actually a change of land use from current rural to residential, and it's I think a hectare, 12 hectares, I think, of land that's being subdivided, together with a development application that goes with it. If we go back and look at our Greater Launceston plan, this area was always designed to be future infill for residential, and I think the beauty about this, even though this is not completely what this application is about, ultimately Waverley will join up with it and it will make a great infill corridor there. I believe the proponents have thought well through the process of what they want to do. They actually live within the development they're doing at the moment, so therefore I guess their personal desire to make the development work for them, and having sort of moving away from sort of having no houses around them to having housing around them. I think the blocks in this particular subdivision are generous. I think there are a number of other positives that they're bringing forward. I think they're intending to put the power underground and also enable us to have enough curtilage beside the subdivision to actually put footpaths up the side of Ovals Hill Road. So all of those things are important for improvement and amenity, I think, for the people of St Leonard's and particularly on that road. It's simple. It's probably the only bit of Abels Hill Road on that left-hand side that doesn't have housing infill. So as a consequence of that, in my view, it makes common sense that it's done. I think the quality of the way the plan's been put together with an indicative how the plan might evolve into the future, I think is really good, and we can understand how that might work, how there will be a link road through to Waverley, which again will take traffic off St Leonard's Road and therefore sort of have a different road structure through there. And I think the design of it, to me, looks like really good urban planning in relation to how we actually infill our lands. And I think the thought processes that have gone in, noting that it's on a hill, so obviously dealing with stormwater and sewerage and so forth is important. There's the current design and plan for the subdivision is to actually have water and sewage which will flow down the hill into a particular area and back into the system. Taswater have indicated that there is no issues with taking that water or sewage into the current system that they have there. I did ask the question about water, lack of water pressure on top of the hill. Again, that's a Taswater issue, not a Launceston City Council issue. But having said that, I'm advised that this particular area actually doesn't have any impact on the water pressure at the top of the hill, and that's another matter entirely. So to me, I think the subdivision's been designed well, generous blocks, all 600 I think bar one, 600 plus in size. So therefore there's some generous living opportunities. So therefore there might be people who might be able to actually put a garden in the backyard until one day they decide they want to subdivide and put another house on it. But anyway, but at this point in time, the blocks are good sized blocks, I think, for the area that the development's there. So I commend this, firstly, the plan, the change of use, and I commend the DA that's with it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I totally endorse and support everything Councillor Mackenzie said. Just something that I wanted to add on page 64 of the documents, because again, sometimes people don't always understand how this works. It takes, on page 64, Mr Mayor, it takes people through what happens now if this matter is agreed to today. So as it says there, it takes people through the process. It explains what the planning authority then needs to do, the exhibition of the draft amendment, and then be placed on public exhibition, and then again presented back to council in a report form as a planning authority. So people often get a little confused about this and what we're dealing with here. Houses won't be start to be built next week or anything like that if we approve this today. Explains it very well there. Totally endorse what Councillor Mackenzie said. Think it's excellent for all of the reasons that he said, and look forward to it being progressed and having the support of the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I went up this morning. The only thing I did notice about this land, when you park on both sides of the road, the access going up and down Abels Hill is not real good. In time, when this next stage happens, I think the speed limit will have to be reduced to probably 40 or 50. I will support this because we are lacking land. It makes sense to put houses on that side of the road, and all we're voting for today really is changing from rural to residential. The next stage is going to be over the next 10 probably years, where the roads go right through to Waverley. But there's no land round, so I will support this today, under the understanding is that there could be problems in time with the speed limits. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. Not a lot further to add other than to say, obviously, strategically, this aligns perfectly with the Greater Launceston Plan, and certainly appreciate and commend what the developer intends to do with regard to ensuring that, you know, the alignment is clear and is in situ with that. Appreciating what other councillors before me have said, noting the 10 discretions that will be up for consideration with regard to the exhibition period, and noting the 4 elements of the recommendation that's before us, as Councillor Mackenzie and Spencer and Soward have said, initiating being the first component of those 4 parts to the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Mayor, and I do concur with previous councillors. I do thank the work that council officers have done in this regard. They've made consideration for a number of things in these initial sort of scoping stages. And, but I would agree with Councillor Spencer that Abel Hills Road is a major connector road from the northeast to the south or west or, of Launceston, and already, you know, being used by semi-trailers and things like that. It will be what you would call a suburban road carrying heavy vehicles in quite a hill that comes to an abrupt stop when it gets to the bottom of that hill. So I do think that there are issues regarding that that fit into a broader picture if we are having the expansion of a suburban area, but at the same time, you know, roads that will increasingly, especially if Dorset Council gets its way and finally improves the sidling, you would imagine more trucks would be travelling in that direction rather than perhaps on Golconda Road. So it's just something that, of course, involves the state government to be aware of, that as this area does develop, that particularly Abel Hills Road, rather than the Tasman Highway, is a thoroughfare that would be increasingly being used, and therefore something that needs to be monitored closely. But yeah, in all other respects, it's great to see a reasonably large parcel of land being hopefully made available for future housing in Launceston.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
Just briefly, and just I think, as the office has mentioned this morning in regard to the speed limit question, it's something that was always under review in regard to it. The actual Tasman Highway does go down through Waverley. At this stage, obviously, we saw, I think, a semi-trailer come down there this morning, so they do choose to use that. They can do load limits, they can do all sorts of things to change that as the sort of residential builds in that area. I mean, there's obviously people who live there now have that issue every day. This is only a few more houses, and it may well lead, as we do further development in this area, to a chance where that speed limit or even load limits are actually reviewed. So I think that it probably ultimately will end up being a better outcome.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 9.2 Amendment 72. Deputy Mayor. Seconded. Councillor Mackenzie. Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak to it?
Not dissimilar to the one that was just approved. This shows the culmination of a previous process that was initiated on the 16th of December, displayed for a period of time, exhibited for a period of time without any representations. So in accordance with that, recommend that the TPC, that this draft amendment is sent to the TPC for further consideration, and suggest all councillors, as they did on the 16th of December, support it.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. While I understand that no representations have been received, this has been a somewhat convoluted process. I'm still not sure who owns this property at the moment, whether any potential future development on this site is dependent upon this rezoning. You know, one might think that that is not pertinent to our decision today, but nonetheless, when we make these decisions regarding educational institutions or former educational institutions, quite often the argument is used that a central location for a university or a central location for a private educator is advantageous to this city, will help to reignite the CBD. But in this case, we've sort of blithely followed the state government's lead, which is to sell the TAFE building and to allow a private developer to do what they wish with it. Might bring further housing solutions to Launceston, but at what expense? In this case, at the expense of an entire precinct. What's next? We're going to move the matric building out to Youngtown, perhaps. This hasn't been objected by anyone. I accept that. I think that it's not been a process that has been largely within council. It's been a process that has been initiated by the state government. And so therefore I don't think that people are looking towards the council to do anything in regards to that. We're merely going along with the process that's been given to us. But in having said all that, we're rezoning it. We haven't really had any instruction as to the accessibility to the project, which to the site, which presents its own difficulties. And as I say, it's in a precinct which does include the museum, a matriculation college and parks, and I think it's appropriate that it stays as a part of that zone, that area in Launceston, which has been by and large a public area or a semi-public area. And so I'm not convinced that this rezoning at this stage is the best outcome for this location. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy, wish to close.
Thank you, Mayor, and appreciating that sometimes the dual roles of a councillor can be in conflict, that role as a member of a planning authority versus a community representative can certainly cause us all some individual challenges. You heard Councillor Walker answer his own question when he referred to some of the information not being relevant with regard to the outcome of this amendment and the process that is suggested, and I suggest councillors support the motion as listed.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That's 1 against, the rest are 4. The motion is carried. Council now no longer acts as a planning authority, just for those to be clear. Now, Mayor's announcements. I do want to just mention a few. It was really good to go along to You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and to see the Launceston Music Society. They did a great job, a great performance, and it's really great to be back in the theatre, or in the Earl Arts Centre too, to be there. It was well attended the night that I was there, so which was great. And on the Thursday night, I did go to the Launceston Central Apartment Hotel opening, and it was quite interesting to see the change happening there, the old Quest building, and to meet the new owner and from Brisbane and see his confidence in our city, which is fantastic. He's got hotels around quite a few places in Australia, so it's really great to see he has confidence in what's happening here as well, and I wish him well with that. And then I did it on Wednesday, along with Councillor Harris and the Deputy Mayor, attend the Hidden Gems of Kings, the film launch at Kings Meadows. Fantastic. They did an absolutely amazing job, the Kings Meadows students. But again, congratulations to Sarah, CEO, and our staff for the work they continue to do in that area. It's going from strength to strength, and I think the work that Sarah does in particular, is working with the community, is very well received in the community, very positive, and she's got a good way of making connections. So I did mention that yesterday at the at the launch, and I hope that she's aware of that, but she's a great asset to our city and to our city council. Can I also just congratulate all those who are winners in the Theatre Awards, and it's last weekend. Great to see a lot of people from this area, many from this area, including Encore, again, with the work they do, and they absolutely, 14 years, I think it is now, or nearly 15, they've been incredible to change the scene of theatre in Launceston, so congratulations to all those involved, including the Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. Cheers. Councillor reports. Councillor Soward.
Just very briefly, Mr Mayor. The Tasmanian Jack Jumpers played their first game in Launceston as part of the season, and I do note yourself, Councillor Harris, Councillor Priest, and perhaps other councillors were present who I might not have seen. Very easy to miss people in a crowd of 4,500. Just all I wanted to add, Mr Mayor, sometimes when events, and you've referenced in your report the soccer, sometimes when events of a sporting nature come to Launceston, people might say, oh, I'm not interested in sport, I don't care, I don't follow it. The economic benefit of having 4,500 people in our city, some of whom would have travelled, I know travelled from other parts of the state to stay in a hotel or with family, go out and have meals, is obviously very important for our city. But the other thing, Mr Mayor, and for me, the result of the game wasn't the most important thing to highlight. If you ever go to a sporting event, you often see young people wearing T-shirts or singlets with their sporting heroes on them. And in a basketball sense, Mr Mayor, if you ever visit basketball games, it's usually someone like a LeBron James or someone that's very well known. To go to the Silver Dome on Saturday night and see young children wander around with the name Adams, Magette, Magnay and even Deans, Sire Deans, our own Launceston member of that squad, was just really powerful, and it says to me that our community is right behind that team. So it was wonderful to be there. and a great result as well as they got the 4 points and got the victory. So terrific and well supported too, as I said, nearly 4,500 there on Saturday night. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a reminder, councillors, this area is briefly report on activities that have been undertaken in their capacity as representatives of council. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll not use that one that I was going to announce. I did have 4 things, now I've got 3. The first thing that I wanted to report on, because I know that all councillors will be interested, and I know some have attended themselves, and Mayor, it's listed in your announcements, but it was a real pleasure last week to attend the Perth Glory versus Western United match at the stadium. And the reason I mention it, not is because I want you to know that I attended, but the reason I mention it is because our staff worked so hard to ensure with a quick turnaround that that could be facilitated. The ground looked amazing for all of the games, and I know other councillors have attended games, and CEO, your work and the work of all of our staff should be commended because they spoke so favourably of us being able to host at quick turnaround, and we look forward to future games. The second thing, Mayor, I wanted to inform councillors of, and I did send around some extracts regarding it, it was a real pleasure to speak on council's behalf at the northern launch of the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra last week. There were a great number of stakeholders who were present in the room, including philanthropic supporters, patrons and audience members, together with other members of the arts and cultural sector. And it was just wonderful to have them outline 19 strategic objectives for the state's orchestra, many of which connect so well with what it is that we're trying to do across a variety of different other strategic plans and platforms here at Council. And the great thing, I think, is the idea of a northern home for the orchestra, but also importantly, that every student, by the time they get to grade 3, irrespective of their location, their socio-economic background and their school, will have had access to a live TSO performance. So what an incredible alignment with regard to our cultural strategy, and we look forward to continuing to partner and work with the state's TSO. And the third thing, Mayor, was just to inform councillors that we have had over the last 2 weeks the first of our youth group meetings. YAG is back, and despite the challenges of COVID, we've been able to meet off-site, and a really great group of returning students that we hope to complement with some new additions to the team in the coming weeks, but really outstanding young people who were involved in some development components of the Launceston Place brand and are looking forward to expanding that into some welcome packs for new arrivals to the city. And Mayor, I hope you'll indulge me that the other thing I just wanted to reference, and I only make mention of it because it's connected to our core business, it was wonderful to see Mayor Christina Homdale was elected as the Vice President of the Australian Local Government Association. Of course, she's the President of the Local Government Association of Tasmania, of which we are a member.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, just briefly, Councillor Priest and I attended the annual Mayoral Croquet Challenge on behalf and represented our council against 6 of the other northern councils. That was last Wednesday. Unfortunately, we weren't able to repeat our win from a couple of years ago, Mayor, but needless to say, Councillor Priest really enjoyed the day, and hopefully she'll be back to participate again next year, as hopefully I will as well. The other thing I just wanted to say about the launch of the Gems of Kings Meadows, a great initiative of the council, and there's still lots of good stuff to come out of that ABCDE in Kings Meadows, including a couple of murals. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other council reports? We'll move on to questions by councillors. No questions on notice, but questions without notice. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Just wondering if anywhere we can put a Ukraine flag on Town Hall. I noticed there's a continuity that runs across to the post office. Is it possible that I can put a flag on there?
CEO, answer that.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. We've made inquiries in respect of the process to be able to do that, and it's not as straightforward as just flying another country's flag at your choice. You need to seek permission from the embassy and go through those processes. So at this point we've elected as a council to light up the building as our symbol of support in that respect. So we haven't gone down the path of bothering to contact bothering the embassy with requests for flying flags because we thought that they had other issues to worry about. So.
Thank you.
We're also lit up the bridge, by the way, Seaport, so that was lit up as well.
Thanks, Mayor. A group of Kings Meadows residents are very concerned about what they perceive as antisocial behaviour in Kings Meadows Park, and they're wondering about opportunities for increased consideration for the increased presence of some lights or additional infrastructure to help with that perceived antisocial behaviour. Wondering, is this possible?
Do you want to answer that or take it on notice? We'll take it on notice, thank you. No other questions? We then move on to 13.1, Northern Youth Coordinating Committee meeting. Moved Deputy Mayor, is it? Yep. Seconded. Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Just briefly to unpack further point 1, you'll note the reference there to Youth Week. Really delighted yesterday to have funding announced for that Riverbend event. It was very successful last year, despite it being a windy day. So we look forward to affording that opportunity to more young people in Northern Tasmania. A great partnership between other service providers and other youth service agencies together with our YAG. So a great meeting. This is a really wonderful committee of council, special committee of council, and we thank Claudia for her work.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any other councillor wish to speak to that item? No? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. Go to 14.1, Council Workshop Report. Moved, Councillor Dawkins. Seconded, Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Dawkins?
Just briefly, another interesting set of briefings with particular interest to the ongoing health and maintenance of the City Park monkeys. Obviously, there's going to be more to be said in the future about how we manage these monkeys, but yes, really, really interesting challenge that we have before us. Also, the draft urban greening MOU. There's been a lot of conversation and some questions I've noticed on how we're going to manage doing that. So it's really important that we have these background briefings so that we can understand the depth of the questions that many ask us. So yes, excellent work from all involved.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 15.1, notice of motion from Councillor Deputy Mayor. Councillor Gibson, moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak?
Just briefly, Mayor, this really I think is self-explanatory in the information that I've included and essentially correlates with work that is happening within the organisation. I just think it's really important when a number of residents who have had ongoing dialogue with the organisation, who feel very passionate about the area that they live, have an opportunity to raise that. This formally captures what it is that they've suggested and enables our officers to continue, I guess, coming back with some kind of strategic overview of what can be done and indeed what would need to be done in terms of budget allocation in this particular area with regard to the suggestions that have been put forward. Councillors will remember with specific regard to the notice of motion from Councillor Dawkins with regard to Trevelyan, the really outstanding body of work that was undertaken there, and it's hopeful that a similar thing could be attained with regard to Windermere and Swan Bay, particularly with regard to road safety. I think it's really important that when people come to us with concerns and with queries, that it's not just, well, that's where you live and so you know that going there. I think our opportunity here is to do what we've done in so many other areas of the city and to strategically provide a little bit of vision and to understand what it is that they want. It's not necessarily all big time stuff. Some of these things are small things that could be implemented cheaply and quickly and would have a great impact on the perception or reality of safety or amenity. So you'll note that the Mayor and I know other councillors have been involved as well, but the Mayor and I attended an on-site meeting last November. There's been various dialogue that has ensued since, including a multitude of photographs which all councillors have had access to see with regard to the state of roads, verges and safety considerations in this area. And I think what I'm asking us to do is to provide a detailed report for our consideration, public consideration, by April 2022, noting that already some of that work is being undertaken.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor, and I stand to endorse the motion. I think it's sensible and it responds to our ratepayers who ask us questions. I think it's a really good statement there, and I guess it sort of leads into what I foreshadow today is actually what our levels of service should be for a number of our communities, not just the Windermere community, the communities out at Lilydale and so forth like that. We often get have conversations with people out there and saying, well, you don't do what you do in the city for us, and the answer is maybe that's not what we should be doing. The reality is people live in larger environments or more rural environments have a different level of service, but I think this really gives us an opportunity, and I think proper levels of service, and that may be across our whole community, not just the rural outposts, but a number of our suburbs, is sit there and say, what is the level of service that we should be endeavouring to provide? And I know we have budget pressures and all sorts of things that create issues for what we do, and if we do something there, then we might not be able to do something else. But having a conversation with our community about what they should expect from us as council, get some feedback on what they expect from us, and then hopefully you'll work out a middle ground as to where an appropriate outcome comes. So I think this is very much in the sense of looking towards those sorts of things, because I think they do deserve answers, and I think quite frankly if we have an overarching framework we'll probably get less questions, because they'll be able to go to a level of service thing and we're either delivering it on it or we're not. So anyway, I think this is a really good step forward, so I applaud the Deputy Mayor for bringing that forward today and endorse us to vote in favour of it.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, I also wish to endorse the Deputy Mayor's motion. Rural living zones around Launceston are something that, as a cyclist who rides not only down Relbia and Drivers Run and Abels Hill Road, but also Dilston, Windermere and Swan Bay, it's a very good way to have a look at what is actually going on and what the road is like, unlike in a car where you have just boxed in and you really don't get a feel for it. So hence I'm very supportive of what the other two speakers have said. That is a road that is difficult because it has a limited road width. It is cut into the side of a hill generally, and when built took all of the good land that could make it as flat as possible. And so realistically the residents there have to have realistic expectations of what can actually be done. But it does actually show the problem that our planning system has for rural living, because in general terms, people who live in rural blocks, and they might be from 2 acres to maybe 10 acres, they do want to walk along the side of the road. They do want to ride their bikes around the general area. And so perhaps this is something that is a much bigger problem that is not only faced by Launceston, but in fact other councils as well. And if you think of things like the area at Devon Hills is a good classic one, but also the one at the back of Riverside in Pomona Road and Stevensdale, where again no footpaths are provided. And in fact in cases it's quite difficult to do so because of the terrain. And it really is perhaps quite a big problem that has been identified here. And it's easy to say, well, that's where you chose to live, that's why you pay less rates, because you don't get as much services. But maybe we should be looking as a group of councils and to look at changes to the planning scheme. Not so much to help Dilston or Windermere, but certainly any new subdivision at Swan Bay should have an allowance within the road reserve for something like the Glenwood Trail. Now, for those of you who don't know the Glenwood Trail, it is an off-road gravel path that is separated from the road at Glenwood Road, surprisingly enough, out at Relbia. And it enables people to walk, ride their bike, even ride their horses safely and off the road. And that, to me, is the standard we should be looking at. Not so much to deliver down there because of the constraints of it, but in every new subdivision that we approve for rural living, we should be thinking, what else do we need? What else do we need to include to the amenities so we don't have this type of problems continue to repeat itself into the future? That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. This problem goes back to 2006, where residents spoke to the council. All I can say is the people that have got properties with any issues should contact us councillors. We can follow it up and hopefully get results. But I will be supporting this because the people in that area have got to, with more people going to live there, the roads have got to be improved for them. So I will support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Gibson for bringing this motion. The residents here have showed a modicum of respect, I'd say, that they have done this the right way. They've brought people out to have a look. They've gently tried to persuade to get this work done, and now they've, rightly so, I think, been a bit more forceful and asked for something to be done and to show a timeline how that's going to be done. All I would say about these kinds of issues in these peri-urban areas is really want residents and ratepayers to look to council as their partners in these programs and not their parents. I think for so long it's so easy to look to institutions and say, you know, fix this for me, do this for me, and if everyone does that, well, of course, nothing gets done. But to be a partner in that, it's kind of an old school way of community working where, you know, you can work together for the best outcome. So I really hope that whatever comes back in these notes, that we can see that there is an opportunity for the community to get stuck in themselves and to be a partner in this solution.
Thank you. Any other speak? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wish to congratulate the Deputy on bringing this motion forward, which I'll support, and I have had some conversations with residents in the area, not as detailed as the Deputy or the Mayor perhaps, and I do look forward to seeing a range of ideas and solutions being brought forward in the next couple of months. I would just like to ask a question perhaps of our Infrastructure General Manager in regards to, there has been some recent subdivisions in the area, but when, one is to look at a map of that whole peninsula, there's still large amounts of rural property there. Are there any pending subdivisions or applications for subdivisions further to the area, and can most of that land foreseeably be developed for that purpose?
Finish speaking, Councillor Walker?
No, I've asked a question.
No, you finished speaking with the question at the end.
Yes, thank you.
You had, thank you. Director Shane Everett.
Look, I'm not aware of any major subdivisions that are coming through in that area, and I guess all we can do is look to the planning scheme, and a lot of that land isn't zoned currently for that type of development, but of course we can't control what amendments may possibly come into the future.
Thank you. Any other speakers from councillors? No, before we close.
Right. Thank you, Carolyn Guttridge, 139 Windermere Road. I'm sorry I'm a bit late and I've missed a bit of the discussion, but I'll just add to it. Firstly, I wish to thank the Deputy Mayor for this motion, formalising the process of considering the submission by the residents of Windermere and Swan Bay. As stated in the submission, the increase of new subdivisions approved by Council has seen a marked increase in traffic on our roads, which are no longer considered safe by residents. Spending on infrastructure does not appear consistent with the increase of new dwellings in the area. We are not seeking amenities similar to built-up areas within council boundaries, and for example, we are certainly not seeking footpaths similar to the ones found within the CBD, just safe, flat areas that allow us to move safely off the road. We are simply seeking safer roads. We sometimes have very little option but to remain on the road when an approaching vehicle also has nowhere else to go, and the option of diving down an open drain or an embankment, which invariably has rotting roadkill, with my dog is not really a fair option. I ask council officers to please work with residents in coming up with workable proposals to improve the roads, and while some compromise may be required on the part of the residents and council, residents will not accept that our safety can be compromised. I also ask all councillors to make themselves fully aware of the issues involved and to please talk with us, walk with us, and drive our roads. I reiterate my comments in the submission that as long as our roads have inadequate road signs, high speed limits, and are plainly dangerous in many places, Council leaves itself open to litigation in the event of injuries sustained by a road user or for damage to property. Thank you, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor, you wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to each councillor who's spoken, and indeed thank you to Mrs Guttridge. I think you heard it from Mrs Guttridge herself, workable solutions. And I reference the fact, as included on page 81 of the councillor's report, that officers suggest timeframes suggested to this motion are achievable and that councillor officers support this motion, having something come back to us by April, which allows residents to see, along with us, what it is that can be achieved to improve safety and amenity in their area.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is... We move on to 19.1, lease and licence policy. Moved Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded Councillor Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to Councillor Mackenzie?
Yeah, I will briefly, and then I'll ask a question at the end, if I may.
You may.
I think the process that's been put together by the officers is sensible. They've brought that to for a workshop for us to discuss. I think it sort of delineates between commercial and non-commercial users and those that have mixed use very well, and the way that we'll treat each of those parties going forward. So I think that, to me, overall, it looks good, and I think it's something I would certainly be happy to endorse today. I'll just leave with one question. It says, under determining a fair contribution for non-commercial users, the council will be responsible for maintenance unless otherwise agreed between the parties. I just wonder whether that should be flashed out a bit, because if it's damage that's created by the party, the non-commercial user, that should be always at their expense, I would have thought, not negotiated with them. So just briefing that, just strengthening that a little bit to make sure that if it's been caused by the renting party, then it's their responsibility to fix. So is that something that could be added to the policy?
Thank you. Duncan.
Yeah, so a lessee would always be responsible for intentional damage. Things like fair wear and tear, we are responsible for that as a maintenance responsibility. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, wish to speak?
Very briefly, Mayor, just to say I think the framework provides opportunity for consistency and equability, and I think that a lot of work has gone into this. I appreciate the work that's gone in, and ultimately what it does is allows our community to be stronger, allows our community to take advantage of the wonderful opportunities and the wonderful groups, the wonderful not-for-profit happenings that make this a wonderful place to be that perhaps would not otherwise be able to occur. And, in us supporting what is recommended before us with regard to the policy, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that such great social benefits are derived. And down the track there'll be a way, I feel sure, of us capturing those as well.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I'm just thanking the council officers for the work here. It is a complex area because there's so many different arrangements that the council does enter into. It has been my experience on my few years on council to have seen quite a few different iterations, proposals, arrangements that haven't necessarily been consistent in the past and have had to be negotiated separately and things like that. So the more that we see that consistency, of course, the better. You know, I'm sure everyone would agree in terms of fairness and the equitable access to these properties. But there's another side to this whole story, I suppose, and that is what properties council does own. Maybe what properties council should own, and what properties council perhaps shouldn't own, and that would have some bearing on the future of what the council is able to offer the community in terms of leases and things like that. So I'd certainly encourage anyone who thinks that the council should invest further in different areas that aren't being provided for to make those thoughts known, because I'm sure it is a function of, it obviously is a function of council that we do provide these services on that equitable basis. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 19.2, moved Councillor Sauer, and seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to Councillor Sauer?
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. It's really important with this one to take note of what it's actually asking us to do. So what we're flagging with this particular matter, Mr Mayor, is we're actually flagging an intention to make a bylaw. It's not actually, it's the commencement of that process. So it's spelled out very, very clearly in the item in front of us by Duncan what we're actually being asked to do. So as we work our way through the intention, it explains very, very clearly a change of, I guess, form around the penalty process, and explains again very, very clearly that these fees, if you want to call them that, or fines, probably is a better word, haven't been addressed since 2013, and explains the reason why. Again, I can't think of too many things, Mr Mayor, that probably haven't increased since 2013. So it does note something which may concern some people, that there is an approximate 33% increase in the penalty fee that's flagged, but it explains very, very clearly on page 102 the process of how this has been arrived at, and it talks around penalty units as opposed to a particular monetary fee. And then, Mr Mayor, to also provide some comfort to people who may, because people always do this, they say, oh, you know, it's always cheaper here or it's always dearer here. There are three tables that show very clearly the comparisons between us and other city councils. It's very clear for people to see. In a number of them, our fee is less than the average. In others, it's marginally more, but again, it's all there very, very clear. A couple of things that I'd probably add before I close, finish what I'm saying. It notes here that these are penalties, so where people have, you know, parked with no meter or no voucher or exceeded a time or all those sorts of things. So it's probably important to note, as obvious as it is, people don't just get these for no reason. They have, you know, breached one of these requirements. So that's obviously point one. Another point though, Mr Mayor, and obviously there are things that happen along the way where there may be a technological issue or an emergency or something that causes people to get a parking ticket, and in those cases our staff look at that very sensitively and consider it, and we have a process in place to consider those things. So I'd say that before people say, oh well, you know, there's these massive increases, it's dealt with. And again, Mr Mayor, which probably adds a lot of comfort for people with the process going forward, on page 104, it explains dot by dot what happens if council deal with this today and support it. There is a process where the officers need to prevent prepare a statement, and it works through a process. Public consultation takes place. It ends up going through a number of iterations. It ends up with the Director of Local Government, both Houses of Parliament. I mean, it's certainly a very detailed process. So that is very clearly articulated there. So in closing, Mr Mayor, as I said at the very start, all this deals with is our intention to make this law. There is a very detailed process that will follow where people can have a contribution and have their say on that. But also I'd commend the officer for very clearly explaining what the process is, why it's being done, and again, those comparisons with other councils for those who may be interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'll just add to that. I mean, it's a logical process. I think it makes sense and wonder why we haven't done it before. And I think the basis of the penalty units and how they've arrived at the percentage of penalty units that should be charged is adequately explained within the tables of comparison with other cities in the state. So I think the officers have done a really good job in putting that together in a logical, understandable way. And all I just note is that if you don't get a parking fine, you don't pay for them.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. The secret will be you pay within 14 days. I don't like a 30% increase. It's massive, but with all the other councils, we are probably okay to put it up that amount, but I don't like 30% increases any time. Just don't get a parking fine, and the secret will be pay in the 14 days. But how come, I asked the question there, how come it's been that long since we've had an increase? What's the reason for that?
Sorry, how come it's increased? Yeah, go Duncan, but I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Yes, so back in 2013 the fee was set as a dollar value, and you can't just change a bylaw simply. It goes through a very extended process. So that's why we've changed the formula to be based on penalty units, and it will change in line with CPI.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Just briefly, and certainly appreciate the comments that have gone before. I think it's really important that we understand that from a day-to-day perspective, this is, at the moment, not a story, it's not an issue, because there are no changes at all to car parking fees. So just for anyone who's confused, if they're listening, that's really important. And I think the process that's initiated through this is dealing with those people who do the wrong thing, which is what we're dealing with. But most importantly, to note that it's nothing to do with parking fees, which are obviously set and, as mentioned in the report, through the annual budget process. I think there's some really great work, Mayor, happening in this area. I really appreciate the interrogation that's going on with lots of these things that keep coming to us from our legal department, and I think it's appropriate that it be supported today, appreciating the change to the formula rather than the dollars.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Soward, wish to close.
Just thank people for their contribution and look forward to the process as it works its way through, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That's one against, the rest are for. The motion is carried. 20.1, Council's contribution to Kanamaluka Centre. Somebody happy to move? Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Soward. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, our council is asked to contribute to a variety of different things, any manner of things that provide a return to our community. And I think from my perspective, the opportunity to see the returns come from what is intended to be a $60 million project is significant. We understand that the need for what is proposed in the Kanamaluka Cultural Centre in Northern Tasmania has been demonstrated. We understand the desire for the TSO to work with a private enterprise to secure a northern home. And importantly, we understand the need for good conferencing facilities. Indeed, noting that government support, both state and federal, is so far unconfirmed for this project, our council is being asked to make a contribution of some $39,000 with regard to covering the cost of the development application fees. And to my mind, irrespective of who the parties are, this is a small contribution for a massive return, a once-in-a-generation return for our community and for broader Northern Tasmania and Tasmanian community with regard to the facilities and the benefits that this would bring to Launceston. Irrespective of the developer, irrespective of the fact that at this point in time the funding is not secured, those are things that will continue, and I think us showing our support to the project today will indicate our willingness and desire for such a facility to be built in Northern Tasmania, not taking away from the fact that we already have our own strategic objectives and wish list for other levels of government, and noting that there is no intention from our showing support today by providing this financial contribution that list should in any way be impacted. And I commend the motion to the table.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I just totally endorse everything the Deputy said, but I wanted to just add a couple of little things. If my calculator skills are what I hope they are, our suggested contribution, Mr Mayor, is around about 0.066% of the value of the development. So just use the word minuscule would be a pretty fair one, I would be thinking. It also notes there, Mr Mayor, very clearly explained, I might add too, in the notes, the particular figure that's quoted. Some might go, that's a bit of a strange figure to be contributing. It relates directly to the costs of the development application and the amendment fee and the planning commission fee, hence arriving at that figure of 38,286. As the Deputy said, he's explained very clearly, it is there in black and white for people to read and hopefully understand that there's a whole heap of other moving parts to this. And as it also says, Mr Mayor, at the end of our report on page 110, should Council agree to provide said contribution of 38,286 for the proposed cultural centre, it will receive the same amount back by way of development application fees. So, very clearly explained, anyone who might be confused or anything like that. But again, sometimes out there, Mr Mayor, people can get a little bit excited when councils are asked to contribute sums of money to developments. But as I said, in this case, 0.066%. Thank you.
Thank you. Question for Councillor Spencer.
Mayor, will this project pay rates when it's completed, or will it be a state government-owned building?
CEO.
Good question, and I'd need to probably take it on notice to be able to give you the answer to it. But I think it would pay rates, just because it's owned by the state government or by an entity. It's not one of the exempt buildings that, like education-related buildings. So I think on the face of it, it would be a rate-paying establishment. But I'll confirm that in the bulletin.
It's going to be hard for me to vote for that without knowing that. Anyway, I think. Now, can I talk now, please?
You can talk now if you like.
Right. I'm a fair person. And to be fair on any other commercial industrial operator that wants to build a building that creates heaps of jobs and does things for the community, it's not fair on those people. Now, we're saying 0.06%. Why do they want that when they're spending $60 million? That's nothing, 38 grand. For example, the guy that wants to build the car park up here, if that ever went ahead, that will help the city magnificently with people wanting to come to town and have a parking. So, in my idea, without knowing about the rate, it's going to be hard to vote on for me. Honestly, more parking, people say about parking, I work at people's houses, they all say parking's an issue for them. So, to give reimbursement for this guy for this, when other people are trying to help the city and they're not going to get the fees taken off them, it's not fair. So that's what I'll say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. And look, I guess I battle with this in my own mind as I have with the next one in regards to council making contributions to anything because of the potential precedent it sets. But having said that, that, I then go and say, well, we allowed $5 million worth of land to be used by University of Tasmania, which in my view was a very small investment for a $300 million development, which was for the community development and not a commercial activity. As I read, the Canamalooka Centre is actually designed around providing a non-profit generating activity for Launceston, as opposed to a car park and all the ancillary things that go with it are actually a profit-making enterprise. And therefore, commercial returns are the reasons why people go and invest in these sorts of things. Whereas the Canamalooka Centre is really designed around providing a cultural centre for the TSO and other things and conference facilities which will lead to amenity for the city. So provided what I don't see here as a result of this, and I think by giving a rebate to fees, which we haven't done, which we're not being asked to approve today, that can potentially set a precedent, whereas we're making a contribution because we think of the net worth to the city and what we're doing is something that we're trying to achieve. I can live more comfortably with that sort of scenario as I can in the next situation with what's being provided as well. So I can quite easily distinguish, and I think that's the important thing that we as councillors today are being able to distinguish about where we would give a contribution towards something which is for the greater city good, as opposed to somebody who might be maybe advancing the city, but it's also a commercial reason why they're actually doing it. So to me, that's the reason why we would vote in favour of something like this, is because of the potential community benefit that we get as a result of something like this happening. So I think, and I'm reading from the person who actually put forward the application, are saying, well, we're doing something great for the city, maybe the city should contribute something to it. That's how I read it when I did the contribution of land for UTAS. I think that's a very small drop in the ocean for something which I think will be a bigger outcome for Launceston and Tasmania, and also ultimately with what happens out at Newnham, that also contributes to the ongoing rate base of Launceston and Tasmania. So at this stage I'm interested to see what others might have to say about it, but that was the thing that was troubling me as to how I could approve something like that and then somebody like mentioned by Councillor Spencer comes up and says, well, how about you put something in towards my project or the Gorge Hotel or whatever it might be. In my view, this is because it's more altruistic about what it's trying to achieve rather than actually a commercial endeavour.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And perhaps I'll just read, if I can, from the agenda on page 108. It says, it is proposed that the centre will be operated and underwritten for the first 5 years by a core and silo hotel, with ownership and management thereafter to be provided by a government-owned authority, which is proposed to be created within this time. So to me, it would be very clear that any building that is operated and owned by either JMC or the JMC and the TSO, they would pay rates for their first 5 years. And as such, I think it would help answer Councillor Spencer's question, but maybe the CEO has a different view. But to me, as the others have said, we are being asked to make a very small contribution to something that is promised to be provided to the community through a government-owned authority. That may change in the future. I guess that's the nature of such things here, that it is something that is being developed privately, and we've been asked to contribute just $40,000 towards $60 million worth of investment. So I'm reasonably comfortable. I also had my concerns about it. It's not necessarily my favourite location for a conference centre for the city, but we'll see whether the other parts of the state and federal government come to the party, and we may not have anything to worry about. If they don't come on board, this will never go anywhere. Thank you.
I might ask a question there. CEO, will this DA be submitted when the money is received from the other departments or already now? Annie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No, the intention is to lodge a development application imminently, and the idea is, and this is the problem with projects and attracting federal and state money, is there's an expectation that you are able to have shovel-ready projects without having that planning permit secured. It's not a shovel-ready project, so that's the thinking behind it.
Thank you. That probably answers your question, Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been interesting listening to fellow councillors, and I don't know where to begin almost, really, but I will speak firstly to a couple of things that have been said by fellow councillors, and Deputy Mayor Councillor Gibson talks of the need for this particular development, as if somehow, because there's a need, then this development must be supported. It's a little bit like saying there's a need for a hotel and therefore having to approve the hotel that is presented to you. It's just a non sequitur, really. I mean, we can talk about, the need for this particular development, but for some reason we're not talking about the location being a floodplain and the fact that it goes against our very own planning system to build such a development on this site. I mean, that should be enough by itself for people to take pause and have a little think about what they're talking about. We're talking, when councillors saying that it's doing something great for the city, who's doing something great for the city? The taxpayer? To the tune of perhaps 85 to 90% of the cost of this? But the taxpayer hasn't had a say in how that money should be spent or whether that money should be risked by being used to build on a floodplain. Whose money? Oh, the ratepayers' money. $38,000 of council money to go towards this particular project. Whether or not it gets built is another matter, of course. So let's not be too generous with the bouquets that we're handing out at the moment, because those bouquets will be coming from the taxpayer. Make no mistake about that. The point here is that we're being presented with an idea which I'm sure we can all find noble aspects to it, and that's great. But then we're being asked to help foot the bill, but we'll be asked again and again through state and federal governments to foot the bill. Now, it may be a very noble vision, and we're all capable of thinking of wonderful visions of what could be built in this city. Yes, some people have the wherewithal to carry these things out. And this particular development might just have that. But let's not get too caught up on the idea that somehow this would not succeed if we don't contribute this minuscule amount, as one of my fellow councillors points out. It's not a minuscule amount when it comes to the amount of money that this developer is contributing to this project. It might be a minuscule amount when it comes to the amount that the taxpayer would put in. But it all depends which way, I suppose, you wish to look at it. Now, I wouldn't like to think that if we were to approve this today, that somehow we would be giving some tacit approval for this plan. Because, of course, we don't have a plan in front of us. We would have to change and amend the planning scheme to allow it to even be built. And it might be a little bit unfortunate for this particular developer, but as the Mayor, when he opened this meeting, pointed out, our thoughts are with people who've just suffered a flood that's 2 metres higher than any previous flood that's been recorded in history in Lismore. 2 metres higher. Now, that may never happen in Inverest. I hope it doesn't. But my feeling, based on evidence, is that it's more likely to happen at some stage in the future than not. It may happen next week, it may happen in 10 years' time, it may happen in 50 years' time. But this particular land that was sold for a reasonably cheap price because no one did want to use it because it is flood prone, is now being put forward as a piece of land that's a valuable piece of land that needs a development that would cost huge sums of money that would come from the taxpayer and from the ratepayer for it to be supported. So having said all that, there's too many other things that are probably worthy of mentioning at the moment, but I think the mere fact that we are even contemplating contributing to a development that goes against our own planning scheme, I find bizarre in the extreme. And I would really request that all councillors, if nothing else, really consider that particular contradiction that we are putting forward at this stage. Now, I wish the developer all the best. This is what developers do. They put forward ideas. And in this one, there's some noble aspects to it, as I've mentioned.
Excuse me, your time's up. Do you need an extension, Councillor Walker?
A short one, please, Mayor.
Thank you. Move Councillor Spencer, seconded Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? That's granted. Thank you.
It's a noble vision that's being presented. And this is what developers do, and they're well within their right to do it. But we've got a different job to do here, and it's not to support a vision just because they've found a particular need, or just because we think it might be something great for the city, or just because we think this is not a very, big amount of money to contribute towards this. I do feel as though we are transgressing our own planning scheme if we're to even consider doing this, and we should wish the developer all the luck in the world in pursuing his particular dream for this site, but we should remember that this site is not an appropriate place for a development such as this, and as a council, whose responsibility it is to oversee these long-term impacts in our community, we should have nothing to do with it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Harris.
Just a question that was raised by what Councillor Walker mentioned about we would have to change our planning scheme to allow this development. This development to me has been elevated above the flood level. There is no plan for living space on the ground floor. It was all up on the first and second floor of the building. Is anyone able to provide any advice as to whether in fact it would require a change to the planning scheme for this development to be approved?
Thank you. CEO?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No, it's very clear that it requires a planning scheme amendment for it to be considered, and it's stated in the. I'm just reading out of the agenda there, where it says the Inveresk flooding code prohibits the community meeting and entertainment use. So the amendment would be for whether or not you're able to include that use within the code area.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Again, just querying through, even though this is not directly a fee that's been foregone, just question whether we put ourselves into potential conflict of interest in actually then determining anything on this matter in the event that the matter comes before us as council and we've, if you like, effectively provided them with some assistance towards the fees.
Yep, CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In answer to your question, the development application would come to the council in your role as planning authority, not as a council. So you're making a decision today, and I know it's difficult for people to understand the difference, but there is a legal difference in terms of why you are making the decision today as the council, and when you're determining our planning matter, the mayor will inform the meeting that you're operating as a planning authority, and then when you're no longer operating as a planning authority, he'll make that statement as well. So that is the different hat that the council needs to have on in terms of making this decision versus making the decision on the planning scheme amendment and then development application.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. It's incredibly difficult. I mean, what we're essentially saying is that we are machines when we're in fact humans, and we can bifurcate our brains as necessary. We buy into this today when we support it, and I'm of the view that I'll likely support it, but we do buy into it. You know, that is what's going to happen today. And then we're expected to come along and somehow be a different person and have a different brain pattern and a different set of objectives and different wants when we sit as the planning authority, when we've already agreed to pay this fee. I think we're kind of compromised, and I think anyone can see that. And as the debates develop today, I think that's become more clear. Notwithstanding, we hear often, we do stand in this space. You know, this city has got few developers. I mean, this Renaissance man whose plans we're discussing today, he's at the forefront of the debate on whether we get our own football team, and here he is leading the charge on classical music as well. I mean, we don't have too many developers, so we are compromised when we make these decisions. And I think we do have to acknowledge that, because it's It's all very well and good to say that when we sit as the planning authority, we sit with one hat, and when we sit as a council, we sit as another. But I think we can all agree that there's crossover. Of course there is. Because once we've made this call, then we're already in that frame. I mean, that's how psychology works. We're already in it. And as much as we might try to step out of it to look at it more objectively, we're still in it. So I can understand the difficulty today, but I am inclined to vote with it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I'm going to say Deputy have the cheek floor, but you can't because Councillor Soward, if you would, I'd just say a few words. Thank you, Councillor Soward. So, yeah, I believe this is a very difficult decision, and the reason why I think it's difficult is not for some of the reasons that have been said, but more because what we're doing is putting the money in to something and we haven't got a guarantee it is going to go ahead. I find that very strange. I know with events we have conditions that if it doesn't go ahead, they pay us back even, or we don't give them money. So I find that as a very unusual thing for us to be doing as a council, to put the money in. I'm more than happy to give my support to such a centre. I think a centre is great. At the beginning, I've always said I don't think it's the right location. I think it's somewhere closer to town, but I don't think this is about that for me, about where it should or shouldn't be, because I credit off to the developer. He's come up with the idea and he's worked with TSO to come up with a plan. But my struggle really is to put in the money, and then if it doesn't go ahead, we've lost that money. Small amount maybe a very small part of it, but I'd rather see that it was definitely a goer. It was definitely had federal and state funding before I think I can support it. That's probably where I sit at the moment. Thank you. Thank you. Over to the Deputy to close.
I'd love to start by acknowledging everyone's perspective on this topic, and certainly, Councillor Walker, we can hear from your voice your passion and your concern, as has been the case for development of this type in the past. So we certainly acknowledge and appreciate that. And I think what Councillor Dawkins has said in terms of those dual roles is absolutely right. But it's important today to note that whilst, of course, it will run a planning process, if indeed it is submitted, then that will follow its own trajectory. And today, that's not what we're being asked to consider. We're being asked to use the other role, and that is to consider the return that could come to our city as a result of having a centre such as what is proposed in the Kanamaluka Cultural Centre. It is generally not appropriate that the council would provide funding to a private developer, but I ask you, Councillor Spencer, to consider in many instances we provide significant funding to private event organisers who derive a significant profit as event organisers for what it is that they share and provide to the city. So there are other instances where the returns, the social, the economic, the tourism returns that come from our investment could be compared to what is being asked of us today. I think also, given that Councillor Soward doesn't have the opportunity to reply, I think Councillor Walker, Councillor Soward wasn't inferring that $39,000 is a small amount of money in any means. We certainly acknowledge all the things that are happening in our own community where $39,000 is a significant pool of cash. And I think also, Mayor, certainly hear and appreciate what you've said, but I think it's important to note that, if you like, this is contra. It's going out on one side and it's coming back on the other. And so even if indeed it doesn't come to fruition fully, my word, that ability for us to fly a flag and say that the event economy, the tourism economy, the nighttime economy, the social return from investing and flying a flag that shows that our city is open for business and wants to be better, despite the challenges of needing for an application like this to go through a proper DA, despite all of those things. It shows that this is a council that is flexible, that has forward momentum, and is wanting to see things happen in our city. And we're willing to work with absolutely anyone to achieve those things. We're willing to listen, we're willing to talk, we're willing to have
Deputy, your
conversations
time is up.
about what is good for our city.
Thank you. I will put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That is carried.
Hang on, we just want to capture that, did you?
There was 2 against, I think. We move on. 20.2, the northern suburbs. Someone happy to move that one? Councillor Mackenzie, thank you. The seconder? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie, you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, without wanting to sort of reiterate a number of the comments that I made in the previous submission, again, this one is clearly a community benefit that's going in as a result of this and going to be transformational in the northern suburbs. I think the site that we're dealing with has been a difficult site, lots of reasons, but the benefits that will afforded from what's going on there are going to be significant to the city and to the people of the northern suburbs in particular. There's a lot of money, we're talking about 1.1 plus I think a little bit more, that's being asked to be contributed by the City of Launceston. As I think I've said previously, one of the key things that I don't like is when we end up running things, because the ongoing cost of actually running something is far more than actually the capital cost, because the capital cost you sink once and it's gone and it's done. I think the benefits of this to the community, and I'm grateful that the state government are going to come in and take over and run the facility. We're contributing to getting something that we think we need, and I know the Mayor has been a great supporter of this, and certainly from my perspective where I live in the northern suburbs, I think the benefits that can afford to the people in that area of this particular facility is something significant. So for Launceston City Council, we're contributing to making sure that it happens and putting things towards making sure that it is the best facility it can be is something that I feel comfortable in supporting. Again, my issues with all these things are ensuring that we're not setting precedents that we don't pick back and say, next one that comes up to me and says, yes, we've got to do it because you did this one. I don't see it that way because, again, this is not a commercial activity. I think it's getting something which of benefit to the broader part of our community. Yes, there will be people that will come into the godforsaken. You know, we can sit there and say, yes, we should charge them more to come in and use it, but I know from relation to how we've tried to do it with QV Mag and other places, it just doesn't work. Because I think you'll end up employing another officer to actually check who's coming in and out the door. The reality of it is we're only putting a small amount in, the state government's putting the majority and the federal government. And Councillor Walker say, yes, the government's funding is coming out of taxpayers' money, and yes, that is correct. But ultimately, this is a benefit to the community. Yes, it is. It's something I think of great value to Launceston, and it will make it a better place for us to live and hopefully transform the lives of many people in and around the community that we live in. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. That estimate around 700,000 take the asbestos away. I had dealings with a building out Youngtown where they removed a asbestos roof, about half that size, but they actually re-roofed it at the same time. Will that happen this time, or will they just take the roof off and there'll be no roof on it?
CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No, the intention is to be re-roofing, so get rid of the hazard, which is the asbestos, and replace that with a compliant roof at the same time.
And that is for roughly around 700,000?
No, the quote there is for the asbestos removal, so the re-roofing I think would be additional.
Right. That what will not be our cost?
No, that's
At that,
15 million that we've got.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, wish to speak? Not at this time. Question from Councillor Harris.
Just a question. Obviously, once the asbestos has been removed and the intention is to go to our facility, is that, and be, I guess, buried or whatever the handling facility is for asbestos, I'm not sure. But that is something that is normally chargeable. So we would be sort of giving money to be paid back to us, if you like. Is that true for part of what we're doing? Obviously, the removal is probably labour, and that's the 700,000, just to understand exactly what the components
Thank
are.
you. CEO, do you answer?
No, don't complicate or confuse. The landfill runs at a cost recovery basis, so there'll be a charge for any asbestos that comes across the weighbridge, just the same as there is for any other project. So that needs to be funded because it's not a subsidy that we're providing in terms of the way the landfill runs, because that's just not the way the business model operates out there. So they'll be charged just the same with any other job that comes across the weighbridge. That's right.
But this will cover that cost. Yep. Councillor Spencer, you had a question?
Yes, can that be put to tender, removing that asbestos, or is it just going to be estimated to a contractor?
CEO?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. No, it will go to tender. There'll be prices that are provided in a competitive manner. So.
Thank you.
Question, Deputy Mayor?
A natural follow-on question with regard to Councillor Spencer's. Will that be our project, or indeed will we be providing the funding and that tender will be facilitated by the state government?
CEO?
It's slightly complicated in this case in order to expedite it and have it done quickly. So it'll be a contract it'll be our contract, but it'll be delivered by, so we'll appoint the project manager superintendent, and so the actual project will deliver the actual mechanics of the contract, if you like, but it would be our contract.
Thank you. Any others? Deputy wish to speak now?
Sorry, no subsequent question.
Another question? Yeah,
thank you. Notwithstanding we've got a lot on our plate, we're comfortable we can handle that additional task?
Thanks.
CEO?
So our task is basically to prepare the contract. The actual work will be done by the project manager, who is already so he's employed by the state government and is already in place running that project. So.
Councillor Soward, wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to add my voice to this, I wanted to first of all start by thanking the CEO for the very, very clear articulation and the provenance around this decision and why we're here being asked to consider this today. There's obviously a very long and detailed history, and I thank him for that, because again, when people want to air a view or form an opinion or wax lyrical about what we're doing, it's all there in black and white. It talks about surveys being undertaken, it talks about my place, my future, obviously, so it spells out very clearly. Whilst I think it's also important to mention, Mr Mayor, and it's mentioned in the report, but I'm going to mention it as well to support that, we know that just about in any construction at the moment, whether it be residential, a building like this, other commercial stuff, we know that costs have increased. That's not a council thing, that's just the nature of the world in which we're in at the moment. And they've increased significantly, and that's been spelled out very clearly there. The CEO has articulated the need to get this work progressing, and so obviously we're being asked to make that contribution. I think the other thing, Mr Mayor, which is really, really important for me in this piece of work and why this piece of work is so important, it says on page 121 that the Community Recreation Hub is a vital development for the city, and it talks about what it will deliver. But it also talks, Mr Mayor, about making a significant contribution to delivering on our plan. One of the things that all tiers of government, be they local, state or federal, get criticised about, Mr Mayor, is that they have plans that sit on shelves, that nothing happens. This isn't the case with this one. We know, we've got data, we understand why this development is so important to this part of the city. And it also references in the report, Mr Mayor, in great detail, all of the things that will come with this development. So I'm going to support it. I do understand that some may have a little bit of angst, and I do hope that those that do take the time to read the very detailed and very clear report that the CEO has and have listened carefully to the questions that councillors have asked and that have been answered, so any fears could be allayed. But it's certainly an important project for our city, there is no doubt about that. For me, in closing, I think it's really, really important that once this work progresses and we get this hub, that the people of the northern suburbs avail themselves of it, because we know there is a truckload of data out there how important health and well-being is. Well, this is going to be a really, really great addition to what we offer in this city, and I very strongly support it.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise to support this request and this motion to contribute to this development. I'm not sure about any sort of angst around the table. I've only heard support for this, but I will say that, in contrast to the previous item, this is a large amount of money that the council, is making available for this. But of course, the difference is there's been a business case done for this. There's been a lot of background work being done. The money from the state government has been promised and has been allocated for this. We're supporting a project here that is shovel ready. And I do also commend the Mayor, because I do believe that you've had quite a bit of a hand in helping to nurture this process and this project through over the last few years. And of course it'll make a huge difference to northern suburbs. Of course it'll make a huge difference to people with a disability, for people who want access to sporting competitions. It also has the potential to connect through to its rear neighbour, which will be the golf club, and I would be interested, to see those types of connections being made further. It has the potential to connect to the what you'd call the CBD of Mowbray, the built-up area of Mowbray. So it has an exciting future ahead of it. And I'd like to think that although this will be a state government facility, that the council might have an active presence there that's ongoing into the future, because I think that would be also an opportunity for the council to connect on a permanent way, on a permanent level to our people in the northern suburbs. And I suppose, finally, it's not on a floodplain. So it's great to see that a development can occur in this city in a location that's an appropriate location, that's going to give direct benefit to the people of the northern suburbs of Launceston. And I certainly support the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. That's better. Green light. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Walker. Yes, it's not on a floodplain. It is on top of the hill at Mowbray. It is something that's been identified. I have a general feel that if other forms of government are going to contribute to a development, that if a council were to contribute up to 5%, then that is probably the appropriate level for local government, and perhaps state and federal would split the rest, the other 95%, or hopefully even business as well, depending on the project. But in this case, it will be funded by the state and federal government, and for us to provide 1.1 million, while it's 11%, while it's 1.1, sorry, it's 7% of the expected build cost, I expect we'll get some of that back through the tip fees, which means it's less than 5%. So from that point of view, I think it's a very appropriate development for our city, and very appropriate that this council support it, because we do need the extra indoor courts. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we need the indoor courts, and we need to do everything we can to help transform the lives of the people in the northern suburbs, which for me is the biggest driver, and I know for you too, Mayor. I think it's really important to understand that from my perspective, and I hope and expect that for the majority of councillors, this decision today is made in the context of the budget and financial aspects that are outlined really clearly on page 122, and you've heard other councillors say that it is a significant amount, and I think for me, I understand that amount with the gravitas that is contained within the budget and financial aspects. But for me, I think it is a transformative project. We are operating in times, where the cost of building and construction is unprecedented, and I think in order for us to see this project, a shovel-ready project that's been shovel-ready for a variety of, different shovel months, it's time for us to get on with it. And I know there are people who are dying to see this facility come to fruition, because they know that the power of community, the ownership that will exist through people in the northern suburbs, the spaces that this will afford them to feel as though they've got somewhere to go, to grow, to be, I think the return will be incredible. So, yeah, for me, it's about understanding that I support it in the context of knowing it is a large amount of money and appreciating the budget and financial constraints that we have as outlined.
Thank you, Deputy. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
Yeah, thanks for the conversation, everybody. I think it's been really well articulated. I think the important thing is the Northern Suburbs Revitalisation Project is part of City Deal. Part of City Deal, there's a partnership between the federal, state, and local government. We're being asked to contribute. I think that's reasonable.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. I have a motion now that we move into closed council. Move Councillor Soward, second Councillor Spencer. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. So we now go to closed council. Back in open council, can we have a motion to, have we got it up there or not on the screen? Somebody happy to move the motion that's there? Move Councillor Spencer, second to Councillor Dawkins. All those in favour? That is carried. We now close the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance.